Are we hybrids? Are we hybrids of aliens? That's what this question is asking. And how would we know the difference between an Earth human and a hybridized human? Could you walk past one in the street and not know the difference? If you have ever looked in the mirror, you have seen a hybridized human. Let me tell you the story of how this came to be. By the way, my name's Kerry K. I'm doing a series called Galactic History, so you can join me for that series and watch past episodes to catch up a little bit of what we've already spoken about. The Annunaki, they're a group of geneticists that were among those who began to hybridize a specific human being for a very specific intention, and that was to populate the false matrix. The false matrix was set about to do two things. Number one, it was set about to establish a fuel source, as in a food source, for the depraved dark ones, who I've spoken about in previous videos. They are the archonic controllers of the false matrix, and they separated themselves from God, and in so doing, they lost their ability to create, and that's what we came here for. So two reasons that they wanted a hybridized species. Fuel source, in other words, an energetic consumption. These beings do not eat food, they consume energy, and it's a very specific frequency of energy. Has to be just a little bit of light with a whole lot of misery, nice little cocktail, and that's why humanity is kept in an energetic net wherein we keep creating and recreating the same amounts of misery over and over again. That is because it is their fuel source, and then of course the creative source. We create reality based on the stimuli that we are fed. These geneticists were looking for something very, very specific. Now remember, they had lost their ability to create, so they had no choice but to become master engineers, and part of their genius was in the field of genetics. It took them many attempts to create exactly the right kind of hybrid that they were looking for. There are so many versions of humanity they didn't quite work out. The genetic experiments were to find a specific type of frequency, and they needed a specific type of human, one that would be obedient but intelligent. A little bit of trial and error in between where they started off and where we ended up, but they did it. They eventually got just the right one, and I've put gold behind me here for a reason. The specific frequency that they were looking for. You know, you've heard the story before about how the Annunaki came here to mine gold. We are the gold they came here to mine. Now, when it's said that they came to mine gold, that gold appeared in two forms, the least of which was the stuff that they mined, the actual gold of the earth. The real gold, oh, and by the way, they used that for ormus, which was like an elixir. But we, humanity, have a frequency of divinity within us that is the gold that they needed to plug them into source. In other words, we have source consciousness running through us, but we're such a dumbed down version of source that we emit a light that doesn't allow us to know the divinity of who we are, but allows the Annunaki, and by the way, not just the Annunaki, there's an entire group of geneticists and archonic dark, depraved ones who are the architects of the false matrix, who are the ones who participated in this genetic experiment. They insisted on something. When they were establishing the human being and putting all of these cocktail of genes together, they insisted on something, and that was that we humans be a mishmash of all of them, because they were creating us in their image. So they needed something familiar, an energetic frequency that had a little bit of gold, which is a little bit of God, a little bit of them, because that was going to make our energy that we emit palatable to them. There were a group of beings that began to observe what these geneticists were doing. They began to observe this with concern. They began to observe this with a little bit of worry as they realized, we've got a genetic experiment here that could go really, really wrong. So they intervened. The ones who I'm talking about, they are the Angelic. They're the ones who looked at what was going on and said, this is not okay anymore. They insisted on their DNA being part of the experiment. To not contravene the law of free will, the geneticists now had to include the angelic DNA in their hybridized experiment. But they made the high frequency DNA dormant within us, thinking, the humans will never ever be able to access the divinity that they are now imbued with. But boy, oh boy, did that plan go wrong. Because there was something that the angelics knew, and that was that even in dormancy, we would access the potentiality of our higher consciousness. And wait for it, here's the beauty, here's the genius of the whole plan. When we begin to draw on what many people refer to as spiritual awakening, which is our higher consciousness that exists within our DNA, it will begin to negate the low frequency DNA, which is of those geneticists, of those creator gods in whose image we are created. It would begin to neutralize their evil. Let's put it that way. It would begin to neutralize their depravity and their darkness that would now coexist in our genetic structure, and the angelic, or the light, or the high frequency would now begin to be the overriding frequency of the human being. And when this happens, and it is happening now, it begins, because there's a ripple effect, it begins to affect those geneticists, those Annunaki, those reptilians, those beings who were part of the genetic experiment, because we are now like family. We are now the contagion to them, but we are a contagion to them of light that is now interfering with their frequency and is beginning to ripple into their collective. This is the plan that they never wanted to see actualized, that they never believed would be possible. But this is exactly what's happening. So are you a hybrid? 100% yes. But the hybridized part of you is coming into a wholeness and a unification of your highest potentiality.